I'm making this intro on Boxing Day 2025, so I hope you've all had the Christmas you wished for. And I wish you the best possible 2026. Some time ago I promised you some giveaways, and they're going to start on the very next video I release after this one. And I'll give you details later in this episode, so please keep watching to the end. In the late 19th and early 20th centuries, cycling was the main form of transport for the masses in the UK. And because of this, the UK had a booming cycle manufacturing industry. There were over 450 businesses building bicycles at its peak. In 2025, I think we only have 3 true manufacturers. That's as opposed to assemblers. And it was while researching for a short tribute I made to one of our local cycling characters, the late Tony Jackson, that I discovered the bike he was pictured racing on was made by a local manufacturer. It was an artisan manufacturer by the name of Holcomb. That name Holcomb rung a big bell, as I'd recently met a Frank Holcomb, so I wondered if there was any connection. It turned out the connection was closer than I expected, as Frank was not only related, he was Reg's son. And that explains a lot. The conversation we had about Reg and his exploits in cycling, which included a bit of smuggling, was so interesting I thought you might be interested. So I met up with Frank on a cold and muddy winter's day so he could tell you this intriguing story himself. So I've been joined by Frank now. Good morning, Frank.
Good morning, Roy.
It's good to see you. I've explained that we're going to talk about your dad, but before we do that, let's talk about you.
Oh, okay.
As one would imagine, you've picked up the cycling bug early on. When did you start riding?
I suppose my first bike, I was about 10 years old.
Okay.
But riding a bike in the sense of a proper cyclist, it was probably 11 or 12, I should think.
Okay. We'll concentrate on getting across this crossing, shall we? Because the last time I came through here, Frank, there was a train coming.
Yes, you need to be careful.
Yeah, it's looking clear. Okay. You were telling me you like to get out and do some early morning rides, and this is one of your routes, I guess.
This is one of my favourite routes.
Yeah.
To come through here as the sun's rising behind me.
Yeah.
That's quite a treat.
Frank helped me a great deal with the King John Way because I wanted to put up some little stickers so that people had reassurance they were on the route. They're not direction stickers, they're really just to say you are still on the route, you're okay. And these need affixing to various poles around the route. And Frank very kindly offered to put some of these up. And in fact, Frank offered to put them up on the entire route. Morning. But I explained to Frank that that would be too onerous because he was setting out to ride the entire route. And Frank, you rode the entire route without an overnight stop.
Yes.
So how many miles did you end up doing? Because you added a bit, didn't you?
I added a bit because I'm still in Imperial. So
Okay.
I think the route is 307, 310.
Yeah.
And I realised if I just went a little bit further, I could round it up to a 500-kilometre ride.
Ah, okay.
So for anybody in metric, it might mean more.
Yeah. So how long did that take you?
Actual moving time, if we're to quote Strava, it was about 23 hours.
Okay.
Obviously, time out on the bike was more than that. We're stopping at eateries and such like. But
That's an amazing feat.
well, ever since my early days with Dad out on the bike, Dad and I, we always covered a lot of miles.
How far you got? a bit mucky around here.
Weren't expecting this.
Whose idea was it to come along here, Frank?
Yes, so Dad wasn't a motorist.
No, I think you said he never drove.
No, not at all, never.
Yeah.
And so cycling some mileage was really a necessity. But cool, we did enjoy it together.
So I guess you had your bike designed specifically for you, did you?
Well, I did. And Dad was very dutiful to his client. I dictated what I wanted. I wanted a very low bottom bracket, nice steady angle, 72 parallel head and seat tube for a road bike. But I had this marvellous idea that it would look really nice with a single seat stay. So the seat stays came up and arched over the back wheel where the brake would connect, and then Dad took a single tube from there up to the top, and I thought it looked really nice. It was a lugless design, and aesthetically I thought the bee's knees.
So this was just for looks?
It was, yes, just for the sake of being different.
Okay.
And it was great. Went out on the road, low bottom bracket, slightly shallower angles. It was comfortable, held the road a treat. But when I started descending big hills, oh dear, we started to get a bit of a wobble. And it was somewhat uncontrollable. And it wasn't long before I had to acknowledge a little bit of a design flaw. And I had to report back to the frame builder, my dad, cap in hand, and say, sorry Dad, I made a mistake. And the bike almost became unrideable, apart from a winter hack bike really. But you try these things, you experiment.
What was his response?
Oh, he was very placid.
Yeah.
And just smiled.
He knew.
and I think Dad suspected.
Yeah.
He had suspicions it might not have been such a good idea.
He let you learn the hard way.
Yeah. Yes.
But it does make you wonder though if some of the designs we see these days are more for aesthetics than practicality.
I'm sure of it.
You know, just the marketers getting involved.
Yes. Yes. Well, this was certainly an example of form over function.
Yeah.
It certainly was. But and certainly Dad never picked up the idea and passed it on to any paying clients. We just quietly shelved that.
Yeah, but that's how you learn, isn't it?
It is. It is.
So how did your dad get into this then, Frank?
I suppose it's really just been a lifelong ambition of his, really, from his racing days, and I think it really came about through the frustration of just after the war. It was almost impossible to acquire a good quality bicycle, whereas in France they still had quite a good infrastructure for industry, and basically any enthusiastic cyclist would make any effort they could to get to France and acquire a French bike and bring it back home with them.
Right.
And that was the ultimate.
So how did they do that?
Right, well, there was a system of you needed a return ticket for yourself and the bike.
Mm-hmm.
So
Customs.
Yes, for customs, and so they would acquire any old wreck of a bike this side of the channel, go out to France and Paris, and my dad's favourite place was a guy by the name of Raymond Fletcher, and he had a cycle shop there, and all his bikes were just known as CNC bikes, and I must look it up. There's obviously it's an acronym for something, but he was quite renowned in France, and this is where they headed for, was sort of CNC cycles in Paris, acquire these beautiful bicycles, and but then to get them home, they would then have to ditch these old bikes. So these old bikes would just get disposed of,
Scrapped.
But they would then cycle back home with the return ticket with these beautiful French machines, of course slightly dusted up and muddied up to make them look well used, so there was no suspicion coming back through customs. And I suppose to complete the story, it must be said that the rucksacks they were carrying were often stuffed full with pedals and gear mechanisms and things like that, and they would be distributed amongst various cycling colleagues at Victoria Railway Station for a small fee.
Thank you very much. Lovely, thank you.
Thank you very much.
So we're on soup, Frank.
So we're on soup. Excellent.
It's the right day for it, isn't it?
It is. It's very soup weather. They would drool over these beautiful continental machines that were coming into the country. But say the irony is, Dad's trade, he was a pipe fitter welder. So he was very useful with a set of oxyacetylene welding bottles and so forth. And his mindset was, well, you're just welding two bits of metal together. What can be so difficult? And he had this ambition to build his own cycle frames, thinking that I could build something every bit as good as these continental machines coming into the country, because you just could not get a decent quality British bike.
So what were the British building then?
Well, it was, I suppose, really it's all down to geometry, really. That's the bottom line of it. The British bikes just had huge long wheelbases. They were sort of cumbersome. Yeah, we always just called them sit-up and begs, really, weren't we? Yes,
just for people to get to work.
Yeah, that sort of thing. And the quality of the equipment just wasn't that good nor reliable. And whereas the Continentals were starting to acknowledge the importance of geometry with the bikes. It's back in that era, the angles were still very reclined, but they're nevertheless very comfortable bikes, all being said, because of that. And I think the wake-up call was much later on in Dad's career, if you like, when I came along and I was showing some interest in bikes. I suppose I was 9 or 10 years old, and I came home one day with this scrap of a bike that I'd built out of literally scrap that I'd find lying about. I found an old frame up in some wasteland, acquired a wheel from one place, a wheel from another place, and basically Dad was just so embarrassed and ashamed at what I was doing, but recognised my enthusiasm for bikes. So one birthday he treated me to a Vulcan cycle from Farnham Cycles, Farnham in Surrey. But of course this was only built for 26-inch wheels, and so we got it home, and Dad's frustration was that it's a nice looking bright red Vulcan so-called racing bike, but we couldn't get any decent wheels in it. So I think my dad's introduction into frame building was simply adapting this brand new shiny metallic red Vulcan frame, setting to work with a welding torch and extending fork ends and altering brake bridges in order to get a set of 27-inch wheels in it. And I guess that was the start of fulfilling his ambition to ultimately build a bespoke cycle frame, if you like.
And what were these, touring bikes or?
No, well, they're under the auspices of road bikes.
Right.
And it's really, I'm talking about when I very first showed an interest would be the early 70s. but they just didn't really have anything special. There wasn't anything outstanding about them. You'd go to a race somewhere, and just they were all the same, all very humdrum, nothing outstanding, I suppose eye-catching if I had a nice paint job. But what was a real wake-up call, I suppose I'd ridden through my schoolboy categories, and I was entering the junior categories. And one evening in our local newspaper, in the small ads in the back, there was an advert for 2 Holdsworth bicycles, a Holdsworth road bike and a Holdsworth track bike. And we was half interested, and it was local to where we were living. And Dad phoned up this number and inquired, and he came back into the living room looking quite unwell. I said, "Dad, what's the matter?" And he said, "Do you have any idea who I've just been talking to on the phone regarding these 2 Holdsworth bikes?" I said, "No." And he mentioned the name Dave Nye. Now, to me, that's as good as Eddie Merckx. Dave Nye,
really?
To me, he was what turned out to be a retired pro who was riding for the Holdsworth Campagnolo professional racing team. Now, Dave Nye, I think politely I'd call it a domestique to Les West and Colin Lewis, who were the top men of the Holdsworth Pro team, which during the middle 70s, nobody could touch them. You'd had all the other pro riders for Vulcan and Colton and Clive Stewart, but nobody could touch the Holdsworth team. They were in a league of their own, which was really down to their equipment. It was all Campag gear. I mean, to have a bike fully Campag throughout, it was lovely equipment. It was as sweet as a nut. But it was the Holdsworth frames that made the difference, and I wish I could remember the Italian designer's name who was responsible for creating them. But that revolutionised road bikes of that era. They were tight clearances, more upright angles, they were invariably a 72-degree head and seat tube, low bottom brackets, short wheelbases, and they were just a dream to ride. And I'll always remember the words to this day. Dave Nye said to me as we were walking out of his house with his road bike and his track bike. And
So you bought them?
Oh yeah, Dad just handed over the pound notes there and then. There wasn't a lot of hesitation. And because Dad was a non-motorist, he couldn't drive, so we got them on the bus and got home. Of course, the other odd thing was, all the years I'd been cycling and Dad had been cycling, we never realised that this Dave Nye lived 2 miles down the road, ironically in the village where my dad was born. Anyway, and but Dave Nye said to me as we left the house, and he said, when you get on this, boy, he said, you'll get up the hills, you'll think you've got a motor on your bike. He said it will go like a dream. And I thought, yeah, it's a bike. I've got to turn the cranks round. It's still, what's. But he was right. There was something about the geometry of this bike. I think the short wheelbase made a big difference. And the low bottom bracket descending with that, your centre of gravity dropped so significantly. It was beautiful handling downhill. But it just stood out different to everybody else, and that's when Dad said that's how bikes should be built. And I guess one or two of the others, Clive Stewart had created some good bikes, but still not up to the match of Holdsworth. But slowly through the 70s, they were getting some better quality road bikes about.
Your father was a Reg?
Reg,
yeah.
Yes.
Did Reg race?
Oh yes. He was a very keen racing cyclist, and in many ways not dissimilar to you. Whereas you're trying to expand the popularity of cycling, if that's the right phrase, but you are very you're just trying to do your best for the sport, and my dad did the same. Now, to put that into context, we're looking at just after the war, the late 40s into the 50s, Cycling was run by two governing bodies. One was the BLRC, which was the British League of Racing Cyclists, and they were the bad boys. They were wanting to change things, and they had a very continental approach to cycle racing. But the governing body of cycling that had all the control was the NCU, the National Cyclists Union. All their cycle racing, road racing, was always on closed roads like Battersea Park, Finsbury Park, places like that. They didn't want to be an encumbrance to motorists nor the general public. Their time trialling was always traditionally at a crack of dawn before anybody else was out of bed. Always had to be in black attire. No short sleeves, no shorts. It was all covered legs, what we would call tights nowadays. And that was the norm in that era. Dad, I suppose as a consequence of being in the Marines during the war, had experienced the continent. He was patrolling all around North Africa, had some experience in Italy, fell in love with Italy and the Italian people, and obviously that era, Fasto Coppi, the great rider of the time, and the romance of shorts and short sleeves, bright coloured jerseys, mass start races, as they often used to, road racing on open roads, closing the roads off. And Dad wanted to bring that to Britain. Amongst others, he wasn't doing it single-handedly, although I suppose you could say Dad was doing it single-handedly within that southern area of Britain. He formed what was called the Hants and Surrey Olympic Cycle Club. So obviously doing all of that alongside the racing. And Dad would mix the time trialling with road racing. But again, to put that into perspective, what was an interesting little story Dad always used to say, when he was serving, he was still fighting in the war, but he was home on leave for a period of time, and he entered a time trial somewhere around about Alton, Hampshire area down there. He was riding a 25. He borrowed a bike, and the only clothing he had involved a maroon coloured racing jersey with some white stripes around it, and they weren't going to let him race. He said, you can't ride in that. If you set off now, your time will be ignored and we will ban you from any further riding. You cannot ride in bright colours like that. And Dad said, this is all I've got. I'm home on leave, you know, I'm on the north coast of Africa. I'm here. But because he was fighting in the war for Britain, they said, on this one occasion, we'll allow you to ride. So, yes, long-winded answer to your question, did Dad race? By heck, he did race, yes. But also, so did Mum.
Really?
Oh, yeah. And actually, it must be said, in a different era, in today's era, Mum would be quite a prominent figure. She was rather good. But back then, women always took a back seat, and she was just there to support Dad. And there's a couple of photos I'll forward on to you of Mum, and she's riding the Ladies' National Championships round Battersea Park in 1947, and the bunch couldn't touch her. She was just dropping them off the back one after the other all the way round. But there was a technical cock-up, and Mum thought there was another whole lap to go. So when they came over the finish line with one lap to go, Mum thought, I'll just ease back a bit, I'll save myself for that last effort. And they all one at a time just slowly came past her. And I think she ended up 4th or 5th or something like that. And couldn't understand why, at that point, everybody stopped racing.
Everybody stopped.
She was going for another lap. But it was a tragedy. She could have been the National Ladies Champion in 47. That was quite heartbreaking when I look back. But when I was a youth, and Mum, Dad and I, we used to go out together, and Mum didn't do any training, any riding. It's just once in a blue moon when she wasn't washing up at a sink, Dad would say, we're coming, it's a lovely day, and she'd get a bike out and we'd all go for a ride. And we had a job to hang on to her. She was just a natural, and I would like to make that clear, really.
Yeah.
Mum was brilliant, but she was such a quiet character, always in the background, never made a song and dance about anything. Lovely lady. So Dad was a lovely man. You know, I'm very lucky.
A great family.
Very fortunate. Very fortunate. Had a wonderful childhood. Great support from both Mum and Dad, and obviously encouraged me all the way with my cycle racing that came on later.
Right. Well, it's freezing cold out here.
It is.
We had to sit out here because obviously it was too noisy inside. But I think we need to get going.
Okay.
And we'll talk some more as we ride.
Okay.
There is one due any minute.
Is it?
Any minute.
Shall we wait?
Coming from this side.
We'll wait. Thank you. I think it's as well. We waited for that, Frank. So you didn't follow in your dad's footsteps?
Not into the world of bike building, no. I suppose because I grew up with a father that was always wielding a welding torch. Any metal work I needed performing, I had no cause to learn or do it myself. It was just simply, Dad, can you come and weld this? And Dad, can you bend this? And Dad was always working in the trades. He was a very, very clever man with his hands, but above all else, he was an obsessive perfectionist. More than was necessary, I think, but that's his nature.
And there was no family tradition of this?
Not in that sense, no. No, actually, the family tradition, if you like, is cabinet makers.
Right,
So,
which you followed.
and I ended up being a cabinet maker. I should always, the intention was I was going to become a draftsman. That was always my destiny from a young age. For a myriad of reasons, it never happened. But certainly using my hands, working in the various trades was pretty much where I was going to end up.
And you make some damn fine pieces, I have to say.
Okay, thank you, I'll take that. So,
And you mentioned Marilyn. Does Marilyn cycle?
she can ride a bike.
Okay.
She doesn't fall off. Marilyn, last time she rode a bike was at school, riding a bike to school and back. She hasn't ridden since, but of recent months, she has been coming out on a bike with me, riding some of the Sustrands around about.
Ah.
And actually, she has, she's adapted to it very well, and actually enjoys it a lot.
Good.
And it's often Marilyn would turn round and say, are we going out on the bikes today? Organising the trips. So I think that demonstrates her enthusiasm.
That's the kind of wife you want. And you were telling me she's just bought some red, white drop tail bibs.
Yes, she has.
Yeah. Do you like them?
She does. The drop tail is a major success. She has noticed an improvement in the saddle department.
Good.
It's not foolproof, but let's be fair, it's very early days for Marilyn, but the drop tail is hugely successful.
Yeah,
And
but
I think
you as a very experienced cyclist would back me up, I think, by saying that no matter how good the pad is, you've got to have saddle time.
you have. It's as simple as that, yes. But obviously a good chamois, as we still call it, helps.
Yeah.
Helps tremendously, but yes, time in a saddle is what it's all about. But I would just summarise that, and I think any ladies wanting a good pair of bib shorts or bib tights, if you go for these drop tails, very successful, very well worth it.
Did your mum and dad ride together at all?
Yes, they did, an awful lot, and from a very early stage, and it's a little family story that I think Hollywood could do with taking up, and how mum and dad met. Mum was working in an orphanage, this is down in Hampshire, Dad had a job, I'm not sure exactly what he was doing at the time, but he had cause to put a ladder up against the side of this old house. I think he was repairing guttering. And he looked in through the window and saw this room filling up with smoke. So he lifted the sash window, stuck his head in. Is everything all right? And a little voice came out and said, I'm trying to light the fire. So Dad, being the romantic that he is, crawled in through the window and helped light the fire. And it's always been a family comment that poor Mum could never light a fire, and she never did master the technique. But anyway, a conversation ensued, and Dad being a bit quick to chat up a young lady, and it turns out that she used to ride a bike. She said, yes, I enjoy riding my bike, and so Dad said, well, I do. And before you know where you are, they'd arranged a Sunday ride out on the bikes together as very young people, and that was the pattern, I think, for the rest of their lives.
Wow. So would you think that any of your Holcomb bikes are being ridden these days, Frank?
I would like to think so. I can envisage it. If anybody's got one of Dad's road bikes,
Yeah.
I see no reason at all why they can't be ridden now pleasurably and successfully. The geometry of a road bike back in the 80s is as good then as it is now. I think anybody that had one of Dad's bespoke time trialling bikes, less so, unless they're doing it just for the fun of riding a vintage bike.
Sure, yeah.
Certainly not in any competitive sense, because the whole geometry of a 1980s time trial bike doesn't really apply to today's sport.
Well, it'd be interesting to know if any of our viewers or any of our viewers' friends know of a Holcomb bike anywhere. You know, are they sitting in a shed somewhere? Are they being ridden? Especially if this owner in the USA could be found. That would be really good.
That would be interesting.
Yeah, so please let us know if you have any knowledge of Holcomb bikes.
Even if the name Holcomb has become removed from the frame, if you spot a vintage bike that you think might be one of Dad's, a giveaway point, the seat tube, Dad always put a red and white band around the seat tube. So again, that might be a little bit of a clue.
Okay. And what about wheels, Frank? Did he build wheels?
Oh yes, yes. Dad built a very, very good wheel. It sort of came about through accident, really, and it was at an era where radial spoking was becoming quite popular, and so late 70s, and we thought we've got to have a pair of these radial spoke wheels, and the idea was it created a more rigid wheel. And without mentioning names, but there was a certain company in London who made us a set of radial spoke wheels, and I proudly took them to the National 25 Championships, and the wheels fell apart, and I came over the finish line and the wheels were wobbling and totally spoilt what should have been the championships. Anyway, came back through a conversation, we heard about this chap at Orpington in Kent called Ken Bird, and it turns out he was a mechanic on the Tour de France, so Ken knew his stuff. And we got chatting to him, said, look, we really quite like the concept of these radial spoke wheels, but these are, really didn't work for us. And he just took one glance at them and said, no, they've been completely built the wrong way. Everything's wrong about them. And so he built us a pair of radial spoke wheels, 28 front, 28 back, and they were brilliant. No clicks or pops when you first got on the bike, and never went out of true, and beautiful, tight, rigid wheel. And so in conversation, we became regular customers of Ken Bird, and Ken let loose several tips about how to spoke, how to lace up a bicycle wheel. So with the passage of time, Dad getting into his frame building and so forth, and then Dad thought, well, why don't I make my own wheels? And that's what Dad got into. Now, what we were all looking for in that era was a nice, tight, rigid wheel. And one of the, I mean, obviously, if anyone of a certain generation will recall how wheel hubs, we were either using a small flange hub or a large flange hub. And obviously, the large flange hub was designed to give you a more rigid wheel. The spokes were shorter, rigidity was a consequence. So to improve on this rigidity, we used to do what was called tie and soldering. And this is where we'd gone back, moved away from radial spoking, gone back to a laced wheel. So where the spokes would cross, you would tie them, just wrap a little bit of fuse wire around that point, but then dribble in a bit of silver solder, locking it all together. So you've got a flange, effectively, the flange is probably 2 to 3 inches across. But then by lacing and tying and soldering, you've effectively increased the diameter of the flange, and you've got a seriously rigid wheel. So this was a step forward. But as Dad got better and better at this, I don't know where he got the idea from, but he worked out that if he had a 24 spoke wheel and he would lace the wheel with one radial spoke up the middle and 2 adjacent spokes would come across and they'd cross, and you had 3 spokes crossing at one point, and he would tie and solder that. And you had a very, very wide, rigid area, effectively what you'd, as I say, you're increasing that flange diameter of the hub. But you've got the weight loss because you've only got a 24 spoke wheel. The spokes you're using are shorter. So you've got a lighter wheel and far more rigid. Now, where Dad got that idea from, I've no idea. I never saw this method of spoking previously, never seen it anywhere. And to this day, I regret that when Dad passed away and we were dealing with all his effects, that I never retained any of those 24 spoke triple tied and soldered. Somebody out there has got them. They are out there somewhere. They'll be quite rare, but if somebody's got them, you've got a very unusual wheel. And I was always proud of Dad to come up with this innovative way of spoking a wheel.
Could that work today?
Yes, it could. It could. Only on 24 spoke wheels, as you can imagine. We don't see tie and soldering anymore. We've all gone pretty much to radial spoking now. Seems to be the way forward. But if you have a traditionally laced spoking on your wheels, you could tie and solder it now, and you'd have a very tight, rigid wheel. Why they don't do it, I'm not sure. I don't know. There's some science, perhaps aerodynamics, marginal gains. I don't know what. But yes, it could still be done.
Perhaps there's a new market there, Frank.
Perhaps there's a new market. Yes. So yes, maybe someone will pick it up and run with it, and we might see a resurgence in tie and soldering of bike wheels.
And remember where you heard it first.
Yes.
Well, thanks, Frank, for coming over. It's been a real pleasure.
So it's been a good day out.
Yeah, it's been a really good day out, and I appreciate it. And I'm sure our viewers will find it as interesting as I did. I hope so.
I hope so. There's a bit of history in
there. It is a
there.
bit of history.
Yes.
So I'd ask everybody, if you did find it interesting, please leave your comments. And as usual, as we always say, just give it a like if you did like it. So thanks, Frank, and I'll be seeing you soon.
Very much so.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Keep on putting those stickers up.
Yes. Yes.
Cheers. Well, I hope you enjoyed those stories. I'm sure you'll agree that they were an intrepid bunch back then. Now, Frank is going to monitor the comments you make on this video, so if you have any questions for him, I know he'll be pleased to answer. So now to those giveaways. Now, some of the companies I've been involved with for reviews have kindly agreed to donate some product for you to win. So the next 3 videos I release will each give you the opportunity to win a product, and in some cases there will be more than one. There will also be a 4th that will be well worth looking out for, but although I've reviewed this company's products before, I haven't reviewed this latest model. So once I've tested it and I make the review, you're also going to have a chance to win one of these products, and you certainly won't want to miss it. So to be in with the chance of winning one of these products, you'll need to be subscribed and have hit the bell notification. So please do that now so you don't miss out. And also, if you wouldn't mind giving this video a like, then I'd be very grateful. So thanks for watching today, and I look forward to you joining me next time. Bye for now.